The host of today's webinar is Leland Peterson, Head of Product at Zalando. You are welcome to send your questions to Leland during the webinar in the chat. He'll try to answer these either simultaneously or at the end of the webinar. The questions submitted in the registration form will be answered at the end of the webinar. I'd like to now give the word to Leland. Thank you again and enjoy the webinar.
Thank you, Anna, and thank you all for joining. We're here to talk about some typical setups for putting together product teams, particularly for building software, which ones work well and which ones don't. And I have a few tales to tell from the trenches along the way also. I endeavor to keep this interesting and also interactive. So fire away with the questions and we'll do our best to get all of them. But first I should start out with some typical setups that are related to, let's say, product teams or teams with product managers in them. One typical setup is that you'll have an organization for product and an organization for engineering and maybe an organization for design and analytics, etc. And this is common. Let's call these separate organizations. The question that always comes up here, though, is like, what team are you in, right? Is the designer in the product team or is the designer in the design team? This has pluses and minuses, but one of the themes we'll get to is that it's actually about people and collaboration less than organization, but that's just one workable model. Another model that I see a lot, and I've suffered through this, and maybe some of you have too, is that you have tech and commercial separate. So you have the people who are responsible for the profit and loss of the business, and they think they know what the customers need, and then you have the people who implement stuff. It's a black box for the commercial people. In tech, you would typically have engineering and product and design and whatever else is kind of voodoo techie stuff for the commercial people. And what usually happens here is that the commercial people, they have major pushes at the end of the quarter, or they have business goals to reach. And they think they know what's right for the customer and to drive the business. So they end up coming up with features and throwing them over the fence to tech and expecting them to be implemented. So then product management somehow grabs this feature, tries to say no most of the time and does it inelegantly. And then sometimes they try to shove these things through engineering. The other thing that happens is that engineering gets busy, product gets busy. You have to say no more often. The commercial people have more time to invent new features to throw over the wall. And there's this difficult relationship that's set up. This, like I said, I've suffered through this before. I consider this not a good one, but it's typically one that's out there, and it's one that you guys suffer through. So I can give you some tips on how to work even within that. So then there's what we've done at Zalando, which is what we call multidisciplinary teams. This is a way that we could get whole teams to have the resources to build stuff and have the responsibility and to be able to scale our organization, which we've needed to do. In a multidisciplinary team, you'll have product, UX, and engineering, what I call the holy trinity, but also analytics, commercial sensibilities, and sometimes operations. Now, these are not people in a team. This is not necessarily like 6+ people. These are more like facets of the team. So you might have product management representing the commercial interests. You might even have engineering acting as product management if there's no product manager there. So in that construct, it doesn't matter who does product management, just matters that somebody does it well. And then you have kind of a mix and match of all of these things. But again, one of the things we need to stress here is that it's really about people and collaboration more than structure. So if you as a product manager are actually driving a process that involves people, you'll find that the distinctions between teams and structures will start to evaporate, and you can focus more and more on your customers and less on your organization. So referring to the Trends and Benchmark report, one of the most interesting pages is, let's go to page 20. So here, in the upper left, you see various kind of roles that a product manager is working with. So you see design called out in two different ways. You'll see analyst, you see engineering. One of the things to think about is that design can be multiple things. So the quickest way to burn out a designer is to force them into moving pixels, that is visual design. Some designers really like that, but designers typically want to be involved in creating the solution and also the interaction design. So think of those as like three facets of the design work. Another thing to think about is whether you have an analyst or not. There are some organizations that believe the product manager is also the analyst, and if you have really good analytics tooling, that's fine. If the product manager is getting stuck and like, tell me all of the consumers of this demographic in Berlin, and then the questions come like, well, what is Berlin? And what do you mean by this demographic, right? You can easily go into a rabbit hole as a product manager and lose sight on your actual customers. So if you have good tooling, that's fine. If you don't, then try to find at least someone who's going to help you out on analytics. But one of the things that this graph will tell us is that in many cases, you have really good collaboration with, for example, design, with engineering, with analytics, but it'll also tell you that sometimes those roles are just simply not there. And so it's hard to collaborate with someone who's not there. And often it's the product manager who has to fill in the gap. I run into this also. Particularly, it's hard to find really good designers, and still you need to fight the tendency for a product manager to do design work. And so pretty much find out whoever can represent that kind of role and make sure to pull them in some collaborative way. But here I'd also like to tell a story that I promised. And that is, there was a team that I was working at Zalando, and we clearly had friction in the team. The team was starting to focus more on itself and not so much on its customers. And I was trying to diagnose this, and I was trying to come up with solutions. And then the alarm bells went off in my head about, hey, I'm actually doing bad product management. I'm basically deciding what the team should do. And so I decided to take a product management approach to optimizing the team. So I put myself in the role of the product manager, and I considered the members of the team that was mostly product, UX, and engineering. I defined them as my customers. And then I just did discovery with them to find out what the problems were in the team. And they thought it was a bit weird at first. And then they kind of fully went along with the process, and the designer really saw what was going on, but they fully participated. And we clearly got out on the table the issues that were there. The mistake I made was I did this in a kind of focus group setting. Next time I would probably do this individually and then pull the people together. But basically we got out a list of all the problems that were there. And then together we prioritized that list to say, what's the most impactful thing that we could work on, or what's the most corrosive thing that's going on right now. We prioritized together just with hot dot voting. And then we picked the top one and we ideated together, right? And then after ideation, then we used hot dot voting again to decide on what the actual solutions would be. And then I put individuals in charge of implementing those solutions. And then they reported back after a week or two. And then that problem started to melt away. And then we went on to the next problem. And then the next problem and the next problem. We actually had 8 problems. We managed, by the time we got through the 5th one, there was basically no more friction in the team. And so we could basically stop this operation. But this experiment worked, and I've repeated it several times since then. This is a really nice way to go, in my opinion, anyway. So looking at the upper left of this chart, and thinking about the relationship with the engineers. So there's a traditional way to split product management and engineering, and that is the what versus how. So product decides what, and engineering decides how. And this is clear, and this is gratifying. But we need to put ourselves in the shoes of the engineers for a second and think about what this is like. You're basically being told, go build X. You're disconnected from the Y. You're going to do it because it's your job, but you're going to do it at a given velocity, which is not very fast. And Marty Kagan, the Silicon Valley Product Group, often quotes John Doerr with this, we need a team of missionaries, not a team of mercenaries. And if you want to actually increase the velocity of engineering, I would suggest that you bring them much earlier in the process. So for example, are you doing discovery without engineering there? There's probably a mistake being made. Are you prioritizing without engineering being there? There's probably a mistake being made, in the sense of like, it's not going to be motivating for them later because they're not connected to the why. Now, if you have 10 engineers, you don't need 10 engineers in discovery, right? You need 1 or 2 that become the ambassadors. But they should definitely be there. So I would suggest to you to invite engineering into the what and still leave the how to them. May seem unfair, but in my experience, it just works better. So then looking in the bottom right, mindset rating, there's this big black spike at number 8. That's basically saying product thinks that there's a good product mindset in the team. Yeah, that's not a big surprise. But there's something else to look at here, which is under 9 and 10, where things are really going well, but still how the organization sees product. And here I would suggest that I think as product managers, we're very clear about what value we create. But if you're an executive in a company, or if you're someone of a purely commercial perspective, it is not as clear to them what the role of product is. Or it's maybe super clear that your role is to just push their ideas through engineering, which is, as we know, not product management, project management. So I would bring to you a quote that I got from a colleague. When she said this, the skies opened up and the sun shone through and I heard the singing of angels. She said, product management done well is business development. And if you are developing the business in a quantifiable and quantified way by driving customer experience, you will find that the organization will see you completely differently. You won't be following, you'll be leading. I would move on to page 22. We're not going to go through too many of these, but I think there's some interesting stuff here. So in the upper left here, there's this big red chunk, which is basically like product managers are a valued part of the organization. And then there's the white chunk, which is product managers are perceived as being leaders. There are some organizations, think maybe LinkedIn, where you have a product manager as a founder. They're really lucky to see product manager fully in the leadership position. But most of us really have to fight for showing what we have to offer. And again, I would say if you're actually acting as a leader in the sense of leading the business and not leading your engineering teams, then you'll be seen that way. And then in terms of the executive view, again, in the upper right, it's still the same theme. If you are driving the business by driving verified customer value, this is a win-win for everybody. We feel like we're doing the right thing for the customers. We feel like we're doing the right thing for the business. These are all harmonized, and the business will actually support what we're trying to do in the future. Moving on to number 23. So the skills and responsibilities of product manager: communication, yeah, check. Teamwork, collaboration, yes, of course. Getting things done, yes, of course. Problem solving, I mean, that's what we do, right? But innovative thinking is becoming a smaller chunk of that. And I would ask you to reflect on this in terms of what the role of product is with regard to the rest of the team. A product manager's job is not to come up with brilliant ideas. A product manager's job is to manage that the best is gotten out of engineers and designers and whoever else, whatever stakeholders that you want in the team. There is a time when you can be creative with them. But I would suggest, if you want to actually motivate a team to move quickly, don't do this as a lone wolf product manager. It's about driving a process. I always say product management is a management role. It's not a doer role. So innovative thinking is only a minority of this. There's one other thing to keep in mind, which is responsiveness to change. Here you can just use the keyword flexibility. I also suffer from sometimes becoming a little bit too religious. I'm sure some of you do too, about this is the way things should be done, this is the right thing to do. But circumstances sometimes ask for flexibility. I would say take that flexibility and make sure that you're playing the longer game to make sure that you are, for example, driving customer experience in a verified way. Then moving on to 24. And this is about how many direct reports do you have as a product manager? And I would also suggest to you to choose. I hear product managers who want to build the skill set of being people managers. And then I hear those same product managers complaining that they don't have enough time to do product management because they're off doing some administrative task, or they're working on, the untangling a fight between people, or they're responsible for someone being out sick and they have to cover it, whatever. I mean, people management is a role, it's super important, and it takes time to do it well. And this is time that you are spending not focusing on your customers and motivating your team to focus on the customers. So consider choosing which one is more important to you. You may end up doing both, but would you rather focus on doing the craft of product management, or would you rather build the skill of people management? One takes away from the other. And then we have this idea of a direct report, right? It's easy to think if someone reports to you, it's really easy to just tell them, go do this. But if you are in a situation where you have to basically pull rank and say, I'm the boss, and what I say sticks, if you have to do this, you've kind of already lost. You haven't gotten the team and the stakeholders involved early. You haven't driven the process to really uncover customer needs and help the team focus on that. So if you have to pull rank, you've already lost. Then it's time to do a reset. But consider collaboration instead of direct reporting lines. So then I'm going to skip ahead just a little bit to one more page that I think is relevant here, and that's number 32. So top 3 challenges for product managers. There are some themes that emerge really quickly here. Competing objectives in the organization. It's hard to get product management done if you're being bossed around by the organization, right? It is your job to make sure that the team is focused on driving customer experience so that you can drive the business. That is, however, not 100% of the team's focus. There are times that the engineering has to do refactoring, or heaven forbid, they have to do a complete replatforming exercise. There are times that the whole company needs to make a major push on something. You're also there to support those, but ideally, this is the minority of your work. If you have a lack of time, which is number 2, again, I would come back to this focus thing. Between supporting company pushes and making the team collaborative and making sure the systems are kind of being refactored and staying modern and driving customer experience, you have enough different things to focus on. Make sure that you're not focused on more than one customer problem at a time. Lack of role clarity. One of the things that I think when you're interviewing I saw this in a list somewhere. It was a list of like 7 questions you should ask when you're interviewing as a product manager. Actually, 2 through 6, I forgot, but number 1, I totally remember and I totally agree. The question you should ask is, who decides what to build? If somebody else decides and your job is to implement, well, good luck. Maybe you have personal reasons for taking that job. But if it's pretty clear that you drive a process and the team and stakeholders together collaboratively decide what to build, this lack of role clarity, this should disappear. Not being able to influence management. Management has one specific goal, and that's to drive the business. And if you do that, they will happily support you. If you don't do that and you stand in their way, they will not support you, and they will find ways of basically, let's say, unintentionally making your life difficult. Same thing with a lack of executive support. Now, lack of product management processes. Here, I would not get very precious about following a particular process. I would rather look at the principle level. Are you focused? Do you know who your customer is? Do you know who your target customer is? Do you know what that customer set needs? Have you prioritized those customer needs? Are you focused on one need at a time? Are you thinking openly about how to solve that need, or are you jumping to a solution? Are you testing that solution before you actually build it? People say, we'll just A/B test that. But I mean, it takes effort to build something and then A/B test it. You can think of lighter weight ways. You can do qualitative concept testing. You can do quantitative concept testing. And then are you actually delivering the right solution in the thinnest way possible? And primarily, are you measuring the impact in the end? If you are doing those things, you're doing a great job as a product manager. The details, well, I mean, implement whatever details the team is willing to support. But as long as you maintain those principles, then you're doing a good job. Not being able to find market fit, again, that's what we do, right? And now we're down into the low numbers. Our goal is to find market fit. Not being able to influence engineering, come back to this missionary versus mercenary thing. So are you involving engineering and deciding what to build? Then they'll be pretty motivated to work with you. So with that, I would like to close the monologue and get to some of your questions. And a number of you had taken the time to submit some questions ahead of time. I'll get through some of these quickly. I see some other questions coming in through the session here, and I think that's great. But I think we have, about 5 or 6 that I really want to zoom in on from the questions that were pre-submitted. So data analytics is critical. What is your cost-effective recommendation for a startup's analytical needs? This is true for a startup, and it's also true for bigger companies. I mean, Google Analytics actually works pretty well. Yeah, that's the shortest answer I can give. Probably there are other answers, but this is the answer that I see. I mean, there are all kinds of tools that are really good for making shiny dashboards, Tableau, etc. There are plenty of other big tools that you can do, but Google Analytics is probably a good place to start. How do you deal with the next question? How do you deal with the conditioning of business versus IT and handover culture? Again, this is a common setup that you have commercial and tech being separate, and commercial, they think they know what's right for the business, and they throw a feature request over the wall to the techies. This is not a good situation. It's not good for you. I'm sure you feel that, but here are some strategies for actually dealing with that. One is basically spend time in front of customers together. Ideally, even travel together. You would be surprised. If you have stakeholders who are firing features at you, you would be surprised how they stop doing that if you miss a flight together, if someone's bag gets lost, if you get drunk together. A lot of that starts to melt away. But the more important thing is when you spend time in front of customers, you get humbled. You both find out you don't know what you're talking about. And you both are able to get into a mode of taking the outcome of discovery, prioritizing it together, and then you know that's number 1 on the priority list. So number 5 on the priority list, we're not thinking about it. We're not focused on that right now. So don't even talk about it. So this alignment happens automatically. Involve your stakeholders doing discovery. So next question, have you come across instances of more than one product manager working on the same development team? Yes, definitely. Sometimes this happens when you have a more senior person and a more junior person. I think that's a fine way to basically train a more junior person by doing. What I do see, however, is the more junior person ends up getting stuck with managing an engineering process. That is not product management. It's maybe 1/4 of product management, but it's not the majority of the product manager job. And so that junior person will basically never get out to the rest of like, what should we build? Why? How do we assess market fit? How do we build business cases? How do we understand what our potential impact would be? So that's, I would say, watch out for that. Same is true for this whole product owner idea, product owner versus product manager. I mean, I've seen this not work in so many ways. I think being a product owner, when you're not deciding what to build, you're just basically managing a backlog. It's not a very nice job. If it's a ticket to something else and you have a path out, or that person has a path out, it's fine. There's another thing that you could do if you're really advanced. You could have one product manager kind of engaged in the early, more discovery type processes, and one product manager then staggered doing the implementation for the previous stuff that you did, or that you discovered and decided to do. This is kind of in the advanced course. I've seen this fail more often than not, but it's a viable model you could try. So then the next question is, what are some successful models that come across in goal setting that enabled the organization and individual product managers to succeed? Having Net Promoter Score, that is NPS, as a primary company KPI is probably the most empowering thing a product manager could have, because it opens you into the space of, it basically aligns the organization that customer centricity is a good idea. It's not true in every organization, by the way. If you have that, lucky you. But it allows you to use all of the tools of product manager or management to be truly customer centric and to drive business success that way. It's frustrating. Net Promoter Score it's a bit like democracy. It's like super messy, but it's the best thing we have. I mean, it's difficult because it's not actionable. It's difficult to describe some of the movements. It is possible to A/B test NPS impact. It's just a little bit tricky. It is actually possible, but it is the most empowering KPI that you could have. The two least empowering, or the two most corrosive ones that you could have, is when management is setting project milestones in something like OKRs. This is really negative because project milestones like deliver this software by date X. This says nothing about Y, and this says nothing about impact. It's not really helpful. Try to find your way out of that. The other one that's a bit of a challenge is when the targets of the business are purely about profit. If that's true, you could apply product management to process optimization. You could apply product management to team optimization, but you're basically trying to squeeze more and more, like squeeze more milk out of the cow. I hope it's a temporary situation for you. So then the next question is, how do you evaluate, or like, what are the factors for evaluating the success of a product manager? In other words, who should you promote? And how do you know that you should promote that product manager? Here, I would say make sure that you're aligned on what the role of product management is. If the role of product management in your organization actually is to shove things through engineering, then okay, it is what it is. But if you define the role as they should be, uncovering customer needs and getting the team to focus on these things and delivering impact, then I would say make those elements that you choose to promote people with. So next question, last couple from the pre-submitted list. What do you think of the VP of product role? And when is it needed and when is it not? I struggle with this. We decided in Zalando to not do this, at least not at a corporate level, because the product manager is embedded in the multidisciplinary team. So that should be, again, it's back to like, what is your clan? Is your clan the product managers, or is your clan the team that you're actually collaborating with? And I would say in most cases, if you're able to identify with that team, the team that's actually building stuff together. If there are organizational reasons that product managers are not able to do this, having a very senior product person or an executive or some kind of structure that has executive support, that can be useful to improve the context in which product managers exist. There's also the tendency to say, well, what if you have one of these multidisciplinary teams, and the lead of that team is a former engineer who's now a business person? Do they actually know how to develop a product manager? And I would say look for structures outside of the team to develop the product manager. Don't rely on the individual lead. So we have more questions that are about this product owner versus product manager thing. If you want me to go deeper in that, feel free to ask within this chat. And then the last question that was pre-submitted that I want to zoom in on is how to scale a product team from 10 to 100 to 1,000 people. And I will define product team not as 10, 100, or 1,000 product managers, but 10, 100, or 1,000 teams that are actually building stuff on behalf of the customers. In Zalando, we stopped counting at 200. We're probably up to 300 or so of these teams. So when it's 10, it starts to become complicated to coordinate with each other. You still want to reduce the number of dependencies on each other. You want systems that are modular enough that you can make independent changes without needing to coordinate everything. As you get to 100 teams, you end up, if you haven't done this already, you will get death by dependency. It'll be so hard to get anything done across teams. You have to find a way to actually make individual teams more autonomous to be able to do the right thing. But as you scale like that, an individual team that's more autonomous ends up having the ability only to be able to impact very small customer interactions. And for that, you need overarching structures to get major pushes done. So for example, one product team may do all of the homework to realize that there's a specific need, and the solution for that need is likely to impact a lot of teams. It would behoove you at that moment to then invite those teams that would be in the solution space to repeat some of the customer research. Don't just read it out to them, but even consider repeating the research, because there are two reasons to do customer research. One is to learn, and the next one is to align. So although it feels like repeat, you end up, a lot of the alignment stuff starts to go away. But there are, again, times that several teams would be just asked to support a major push or some kind of project that was driven up to the top and may appear to those other teams to be a top-down driven thing. If you have a certain set of artifacts to maybe summarize in a page or two, this is what the customer, or this is who the customer was we were targeted on, here's their need, here's the solution, here are the solution alternatives we considered but dismissed, and here's why. Here's why we're needing you to be involved in the solution space. Like, just having that clear story is a good way to get people aligned to do what you need to get done. So with that, I would like to switch over to some of the questions that are coming up right now in the chat. Yes, please, product manager versus product owner, especially in the context of Scrum, multiple Scrum teams. We have something called a chief product owner, area product owner, and then product owner, not to forget the central product team. Okay, let me go deeper here. The job of a product manager is fundamentally to uncover the needs of customers and get the team focused on those needs in a prioritized way, so you're not focused on many things at once, and drive a process to ideate, think openly about how to solve those, test the solutions, build the one that tested well, and measure the impact. If a product owner is not involved in that process, if they're basically just managing the backlog, consider giving that job to engineering. That is fundamentally engineering work. Or consider the product owner part of the engineering staff, whatever, but like, I don't know, this is fundamentally not product work. I know, it's a statement. I'd be interested in having a beer chat with somebody about this. Or maybe even we can meet each other at the Product Management Festival coming up in November and have a bigger discussion about this, because I think this is really a topic. What I'm saying runs against the grain, and I know that. But what I'm saying comes out of experience. How does the career path for a product manager look like at Zalando? Do you have product owners as well? Yeah, we had this tricky naming problem. We did actually have product owners, but they were head-level product positions. We finally gotten rid of this title. But what does the career path look for a product manager? So we are aiming higher and higher in terms of more skilled people. We want Zalando to be the place that an experienced product manager can come, a really good product manager, to become a great product manager. That we want to be the place in Europe for this. I don't mean to be an advertisement for my company, but actually I honestly believe this. We have various structures to help a product manager improve. So we have very clear expectations of what a product manager's job should do. We keep this constantly up to date. We have a strong community of people who share tips and tricks, but also get together for other reasons. We're plugged into the community within Berlin and also the community around Europe. And we've even had product managers, for example, a product management festival in Singapore recently, giving a talk. We also have a product management mentor program. What we found is that the mentor program focuses or is the most impactful when it helps a product manager succeed in their career through soft skills. Like, why am I plateauing in my career? Why am I not able to proceed? Or why are people not actually following me? The mentor program actually helps with that. If it's about like, how do you run discovery when you can't get the attention of user research? That's just a coaching exercise. And we do have people who coach each other. We used to have a central coaching team, but we've now decentralized that. So we all help each other. Let's see. There's another question. How do we get the exec team to support this progressive thinking, especially if some come from backgrounds where a separation of commercial and engineering is conditioned thinking, the handover culture? To quote a movie from, I think it was from the 90s, Show Me the Money. You cannot make a philosophical argument to an executive with a commercial background that somehow in some abstract way driving customer experience will do this and will do that, and therefore we need to do things this way. They are responsible for the outcomes of the business. They may have to report to investors. They may have to report to a board of directors, right? Just don't. This is really patronizing for them. Please don't do this to them. The best way to get them to come on board with doing the right thing in terms of product management is to show them. Show them that this can work and that you've quantified the impact. And you won't always win, right? It's fine to say we tried this in 6 different ways and 3 of them didn't come out, but 3 of them did. Like, business is messy. They'll totally understand that. But you have to show them a track record of what you can actually achieve for the business. And then they'll start to come around, and then the conversations become much easier. What's your opinion on the following setup? There exists a product manager in charge more of the commercial side. How do we bring more revenue to the business? Okay. A product owner and the dev team. How do we define team? The product manager is the one meeting the customers, getting insights. The product owner is seen as more someone who ensures things get done, which I personally think is not right. Okay, what's my opinion about this? I would say this is like a loose collection of people that try not to bump into each other and try to somehow succeed in spite of not collaborating. The first thing I would do is get select people from all of these individual disciplines and go meet some customers. And then get together and prioritize the customer needs. And then pick a need and ideate together. Right? I'm repeating myself, but it is amazing. You do this once or twice, and all of these things just melt away. Again, it's more about people and collaboration than it is about structures. So, question for best practices: how to bring the understanding product thinking to management. Again, we're repeating ourselves. It's about driving the business by driving customer experience, right? If you create customer value, the business will follow you. I'd like to take a few minutes then to open it up. Feel free to ask another question now. We have another 3 minutes or so. In Germany, the product owner have the job from the PM. This confused me. In Germany, I don't understand that question. Okay. Yes, beer chat. Awesome. Let's meet at Product Management Festival in November. How do you prioritize the ideas or needs? Oh, excellent. This is actually, there are 2 things that I consider the hardest things to do in product management. One is prioritizing in a way that everyone agrees to, and the second one is getting everything aligned on what you actually prioritize. I have seen so many, and I've done these myself, so many attempts to quantify the prioritization process, right? It would be so nice to be able to create a model where you like say, high, low, medium equals 1, 2, 3, or like create business cases and some index number spits out, and there you get an automatic ranking of priorities. This always fails. And it always takes a lot of time. I've never, ever seen this succeed. I've been doing product management, I think, for 18 years now or something like this. I have never seen this succeed because there's just an X factor, right? Like, let's say you have a problem that's super corrosive for first-time users, and you have a problem that is super annoying for your best customers. Which one do you work on first? Well, it depends, right? Heuristically, you would say, let's do the right thing for our best customers. But your best customers are also best customers because they're sticking with you in spite of that problem. If you're in a growth market, maybe you should pay attention to the one that is a corrosive first-time user experience. Or if you're in a mature market, you want to keep the customers you have, right? There are just these qualitative things that you're going to need in prioritization. So this is probably the last thing I'm going to end with, which is, honestly, if you create a quadrant of assessed impact and assessed effort, and you don't over-intellectualize this, you just put a big quadrant up on a wall or a whiteboard or whatever, and you have your problems on Post-its. And then you just ask, this has to be a multidisciplinary team, right? You have to have representation from engineering, product, UX, stakeholders, whoever, and no strong population bias. Then you can just put the Post-its into what you think or you believe or you feel is high impact, low effort. And then it becomes super obvious what to focus on next. And then it actually doesn't matter if the thing you're going to focus on is customer priority 1, 2, or 3. It just matters that you're working on something impactful for your customers. So I would say don't get precious about it. Take the 5 or 10 minute approach it'll be, you could do business cases and canvases and all that kind of stuff and still be prioritizing 3 months later, or you can be done in 10 minutes. In my experience, that works better. With that, we're actually out of time. If you guys would like to come together and talk again, we can meet at Product Management Festival, or feel free to engage with us and we can come up with more talks in this series or other formats that might work for you. Otherwise, I would like to thank you for your time. I hope you got value out of this, and I hope to see you soon.